Happy Wednesday, everyone. So, today I'm going to be talking about how we're feeling about the situation that we are currently in. Or maybe we've gotten out of it, right? So, this group is for women who are currently experiencing abuse and narcissism and are looking for a way out. But it's also for women who have experienced it in the past but not realizing that, this is where I was, realizing that we've been holding on to so much negativity because, like everything that's happened. And so it's like essentially we've moved on. What is that phrase? Time heals all wounds. Sometimes not. Most of the times not. And this is the reason why, right? And so if you look at the title, the question I was posing today is, are you angry with God? And it actually came from the Joyce Meyer's Bible that I read pretty much every day. And it has these devotional blurbs in it. I like it. I mean, if you're looking for a Bible or whatever, I really like it because, right, Joyce has written a lot of books. I don't know why I'm plugging this, but she's written a lot of books, but it's like the devotionals are right here, like next to the Bible verse that it's referencing. So so I want to start reading. The passage that she wrote about is Malachi 3:13-15. Right, so these people were angry against God and were speaking very harshly against him. And so the other passage I was reading also this morning was Ezekiel. What is it? 37:4, where Ezekiel was prophesying to the dry bones and what kind of was commanding them to, God told them to prophesy to the dry bones, and then they, short version, they got together. And then he said, speak life into them. And then they just started to grow muscles and things. And then it became a full body, but yet it didn't have a spirit. Anyway, so God told Ezekiel to prophesy to the dry bones. And then all of these things started to happen. Then I was like, okay. So how I do my devotional is I kind of just go where the verses take me. I'm like, I'm feeling like here. Sometimes I just open it to, like, I look like in the, the pages. I'm like, I feel like I want to stick my finger in here, and I just open it. And usually there's something there for me that I need that day. Anyway, so that's how I got from Ezekiel to Malachi. It wasn't a thing. I just was kind of flipping through. Anyway, let me just start reading. Right, we're angry with God, and so this is where it ties into what Ezekiel was talking about. So he was saying sometimes Joyce Myers was saying sometimes we try to get things we want from God by imitating what we have seen others do. Then we get upset when he doesn't answer the way we think he should. But by copying others' actions, we may be doing things God never told us to do. Right? So God commanded Ezekiel to speak to the dry bones. And then the dry bones did everything that God said to do, right? And so I don't know where you at in your faith journey or faith walk, whatever, but because I know we have a lot of people in here who have all different backgrounds and things, but honestly, if this kind of speaking about God offends you, this is my number one resource, is the Bible. So love you, thanks for being here. But if this stuff kind of offends you, then just go ahead and leave the group. But if you're okay with it, and you're maybe not walking with God, or you've never really experienced hearing from God or reading the Bible, whatever, and you're okay with it, then, just stick with me, because for me, God always brings these things. He brings the word to life for me, and it always hits me like it's kind of like when you see a meme online and you're like, oh my God, that hits me, and then you share it. That's kind of how I'm gonna be doing with these verses. Like, if it hits me in the right way, I'm gonna share them. So yeah, so the reason why speaking to the dry bones worked was because God was the one that told him to do that. And so we can't be angry when God doesn't show up if we're doing something else, that like some advice that was given to someone else, and we follow that path. Meaning, like, I'll be giving a lot of advice and things that I've done. Like, even if you watch the podcast Facebook Live that's also in the group, the one that I did with Queena, like I said, she's like, how did you get out of those relationships? And I said, this is how I got out of it. And I talk about, my affair, my suicide attempt, what else did I talk about? But, and I said, I don't recommend, like, this is not the recommended way to leave a narcissistic relationship, but this is what I did. Of course, it was not ordained by God. Anyway, so this leads me to the next section, right? So Joyce is saying, do not be angry with God for not blessing something he did not tell you to do, right? So even with relationships, like both of my failed marriages, God never told me to marry those two fools. He didn't tell me to marry them, but yet I did it anyway. And so the first time was kind of like, I was in the military, I was young, I was like, maybe I should. And then the second time, right, so I had fallen away from the faith, like when I left Hawaii and I went into the military, and then I was doing my own thing. I came back, kind of was in and out of church. I mean, I went to church with my mom, but I wasn't plugged in anywhere. And then I actually got healed from something, like, I legit got healed. Like, the doctors couldn't figure out how I got healed. But anyway, even in that time, I wasn't fully walking with God. And what ended up happening was, I don't know what I was going to say. I got distracted somehow. Oh, okay, and this is the part where, God didn't tell me to marry my second husband either. But, we got together, not proud of the way we got together. And then I was on maternity leave, and I don't like being home alone at night. But he used to work night shifts. And then every time he was on night shift, I was starting to listen to K-Light or whatever. It's a Christian talk radio, and then there would just be preachers on there with half-an-hour segments, and I would just play that all night, just so I didn't have to feel like I was alone. And then, through listening to what these preachers were saying, I was like, oh, I was reminded of my faith. I was reminded of, how God works and things. And so I was pregnant at the time. We weren't yet married. We got married. I was having contractions. And then, I was having contractions, and I gave birth the next morning. And so I was like, well, our relationship was not going very well. It was not going well at all. I mean, honestly, when I was 6 months pregnant, I remember sitting on the couch and be like, oh, he left to go to a strip club. Like, this is the pattern. Like, we used to fight. Then he was like, I'm out of here. And then we didn't have online banking, but I was like, he's like, I'm out of here. And then he'd go pull out Max from the ATM, go to the strip club, spend a lot of money, and then come back and, smell like, you know, glitter and perfume. And so, yeah, it was one of those times where I knew he had gone there. I don't know if we had online banking or what, but I knew he had gone. And I was just sitting on the couch and I was like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I still in this relationship, right? And so I was done. I was done with the relationship. And then what got the better of me was like, oh, well, maybe if we get married, God will redeem this relationship. He didn't. Things got worse. But, that's because I came up with the idea that, oh, maybe because we're not married, we were living in sin, fornication, then we had this baby. I was like, I can't have this baby out of wedlock. So let's just get married. And yeah, it was right after that when I was 6 months, and then we were trying to plan it. But he was working so much, we couldn't plan it. Well, first I had to convince him that I think that was a God thing to do. And then, yeah. But, I mean, ultimately, God does bless our decisions, our walking towards him. And, he honors everything that we try to do. But when we're trying to rectify a situation by okay, if I get married, by the law or whatever, the rules or whatever, God should bless me. But if that's not the way God wants to bless you, then it's not. And then the only reason why I say that is it wasn't a good relationship. Like, I already had right at 6 months pregnant, I already knew I had to be out of that relationship. Like, it was done, it was finished, I had to be out. And like, yes, we would have been connected, like we would have had a kid together, but like we weren't married, so none of our assets would have combined, and then it wouldn't have costed me 20 grand just to fund the divorce. And that's not even including the assets that I lost during the divorce or whatever. I didn't lose anything, but we had to split. 20 grand was just the amount of debt that I racked up during the divorce. So, all of that to say, that's kind of the backstory of where we're going today. I have these other... So, three takeaway steps for you guys today, and this is the part that's been heavy on my heart, is forgiveness is the key to getting past what's happening in your life, in these relationships. And there's 3 key people that need to be included in your forgiveness, either journaling or your prayer time, or however you're going to forgive these people. Yeah, so I'm going to read again what Joyce is saying. So number 1 is you need to forgive God. And she says, this may sound odd to you, but if you're angry with God, you need to forgive him. So she also goes on to say, God does not need your forgiveness. He has done nothing wrong, but you need to be released from the harsh results of the unforgiveness and bitterness you may have directed towards God. Right? Because there's specific laws that we operate in, where there's a law of gravity, but there's also different laws that were set into motion that I'm not going to go through all of them, but if you have unforgiveness in your heart, there's no way that God can actually work. because um Matthew says that, right, if we are in offense with anyone, God doesn't hear our prayers. And so even in being in unforgiveness towards God, it sounds weird, but God's not hearing our prayers. It's kind of like when you say sorry, like say, right, when you're a kid and you got into a fight with your brother or sister, and you're like, your mom tells you, say sorry, right? Well, you're a mom too, right? You tell your kids, hey, don't do that, or why did you hit your sister in the face? Say sorry. Sorry, right? It's like when we're still, like, our forgiveness is not genuine, or our love towards the other person is not genuine, if we are still sitting in unforgiveness and bitterness, right? So you can tell when your child is fully repentant for hitting his sister if it's done in love. And then, like, and I've taught Sunday school as well. Like, you can see, like, the negativity literally, like, melt off of the kid when they are ready to forgive, and then it's those moments where you're like, and then they're like, I'm so sorry, and then, like, it's really heartfelt. And so that's kind of how I envision this, right? When we have unforgiveness towards God, it's kind of like, yeah, like that, even like when we're angry towards our parents, right? God is like our heavenly father, or he is our heavenly father. And so sometimes we have a skewed relationship of God because of how our parents treated us. And so it, like, my relationship with my mom and my stepmom is strained because of how I think they feel about me, or just stuff that we've been through in the past that makes me think that, like, anything they say or do is not genuine. And so I don't receive it genuinely, and I don't give genuinely either. I mean, I do, like, bare minimum, because you have to hang out because you're family kind of thing. But because even my husband, he's like, why do you even go? Why do you even hang out with them when you're just doing it? And I say, I do it for my dad, or I do it because I'm trying to be a good kid. I don't know. I'm not even Catholic, so I don't even know how that works. But you know what I'm saying. Oh yeah, so number 1, we have to forgive God for any resentment we're holding in our heart towards him because of things that have happened in our lives. Things that we, like, oh, why did God allow this to happen to me? Like, my son, my son is not, he gave up on God, essentially, because he's like, if God loved me, if God is the God he says he is, why did all this bad stuff happen to me? And he was abused. Like, I'm not gonna know, I'll share that on a different day. But yeah, he was abused, and of course, narcissistic. I didn't know that all of that was happening. I didn't know it was happening because it would take place, like, outside of my knowledge, whether I was at home, like I was at work, or he was doing it in the shower even, or like, he would pinch my son in places that it wouldn't leave a visible bruise. Stuff like that was just happening. So 1, we have to forgive God. Oh, right. And so, sorry, my son, right? So he's like, if God loved me and he cares about me like you say that he does, then why did all this bad stuff happen to me and continuing to happen to me, right? So, right, my son like, let's put it this way. My son came to church with me all the time. I sent him to a Christian school. um the church that we were attending had a school attached to it. And he was my right hand man. He would run my computer, my soundboard, whatever. He would help me set up my class every Sunday. Before I had to teach, or he'd help me set up the prizes and things. So he was around the church a lot, and sometimes even being around the church a lot, it makes it more dissonant, where you're hearing all these things like God is supposed to be this, God's supposed to be that, and then you're not seeing it happen in your life. Then there's this real disconnect of like, God, I think I'm doing all the right things, or these people are saying that you are a good God, that you're gonna come through, like even like claiming Bible verses, like declare even like affirmations, and just declaring God's word over your life doesn't work if you're one, if you're in unforgiveness, and then two, if it does, you're not seeing anything manifest from it. Let's see. Okay, number 2, let's just get off that horse, is because this horse is actually bigger than the first one. It's, you have to forgive the perpetrator. You have to forgive the people who have hurt you. It's the same principle. Like, if you're living in resentment and bitterness, God cannot work. So even like during my divorce, I know that the outcome was a less because I was in resentment and bitterness. I just say like that was revealed to me while it was happening, and I couldn't release. I just couldn't release. I know for me, holding on to the anger was what was fueling me, right? And so holding on to that anger was my way of keeping him out of my life. And it's kind of like passive aggressive, right? I'm like, I'm just gonna be angry at you, and you can't come at me and whatever, right? Because my heart still loved him, and that's the hardest part, when people do you wrong or whatever, and they're supposed to love you, and they're supposed to either be your friend, be your husband, be your lover, whatever, and they do you wrong. It's like your brain's confused. You're like, wait. And even for my son, it's like, wait. This dude is supposed to be like my dad, right? He didn't have his dad in his life at the time, and so my his stepdad was the only dad that he knew at the time. And so he's like, wait, why is my dad, like, dads are supposed to love you, like the whole dissonance thing, right? Not computing. And so I get that. And then sometimes to make it, I don't want to use the word feel better, but I think you know what I mean. If you don't, just let me know in the comments. But in order to feel better, make it, because it's a cognitive dissonance, right? It's like, if dad is supposed to equal love, and this is hurting me, hurt and love don't, they're two opposite things. So and then if you know Joyce Meyer's story, right, she was sexually abused by her own father for like years. I think once she started to develop, I don't know how old she was until like she moved out of the house. She was sexually abused by her own father, and so there's this whole compartmentalization that takes place when in your brain is like, this does not compute, and so in order to survive, your brain comes up with these um your brain has a way of making it make sense. And so however it happens, the your brain will try to make sense out of things. Like if it's like math, right? A plus B equals C, but let's say C is equal to D, but then anyway, I'm not gonna do math with you because that's not my strong suit. um but you know what I'm saying. It's a whole cognitive dissonance thing. Like this is not computing. And so yes, although I know that forgiving the person who hurt you is like, this does not compute. Like, why am I going to forgive him? Robot voice, I don't know. Try. I don't the robot voice. So I mean, all of that to say, yes, it feels weird. It's going to feel awkward. It's not going to feel like this is the right thing to do. The logically, according to the laws of how God operates, we cannot be in unforgiveness and expect the blessings to come. Like, if your kid just goes, sorry, and you're like, you can't get ice cream now just because you said sorry. Do you feel sorry? Do you feel repentant? And like, you as a mother know, or if you're just watching your nieces and nephews or whatever, you know when someone is repenting. Like, okay, here's the blessing now, here's your ice cream, good job. And not, but there's certain things that God, he operates by laws too, right? So yes, God is all powerful, but yet there's certain things that he can't do because it's not in his nature. Anyway, I'm not a preacher or by any means, but let me know if that confuses you. So the third one that I also wanted to talk about, the third person you need to forgive is yourself. And then that sounds weird, but this is where it's kind of like forgiving God, where it's kind of like, what? Like, but just listen, it's forgiving yourself for your part, right? Is there things that happen to us that are not our fault, like, at all? But then this is the part where it's like, I should have, if only I did X instead of Z, I wouldn't be here right now. So those are the things that you need to forgive yourself for. Okay? All the shoulda, woulda, couldas, and if only, all of those things, you have to forgive yourself. One, like, you have to forgive yourself for not knowing. Like, I had to forgive myself for not knowing that my son was that heavily abused, where, and I had to forgive my ex because after finding out more about his family, like, that's the way that he was disciplined, that's what he knew. Not to condone his behavior, but just looking at how he was raised, how his family is, how they handle life in general. Like, that's what he knew, and that was his default. And so, right, I had to forgive him. And then also, like, what are forgiving self? Like, what are my defaults? Like, like, I should have known better. Like, if only, like, those are the things that you need to really just forgive yourself for. And until you forgive yourself, you can't get over it. Like, you're still holding on to these mistakes that you made, and at a point in your life when you didn't know any better, right? Inherently, we always do what we know is the best at the time. Like, we only know what options are available to us because they're what we've been exposed to. I don't know why this analogy is popping up, but I didn't know. I mean, I knew that there were Disney annual passes, but I didn't know how they worked. And now Disney is like going to the mall. I was like, okay, yeah, we'll just go to Disneyland, hang out, eat some food, buy some stuff, come home. Or some days we go and we buy nothing, and we use that. Like, so there are things now that I know, and I behave differently. And it's a different positioning as well. I'm an annual pass holder now. But when, we used to come here on vacation, it's like, oh man, it's like the worst. Now that I know better, you go to Disneyland on vacation, you're like pounding pavement, you're like waking up early. Like, the park opens at 8 or whatever. Magic Morning opens at 8. You get there, you get in, you stand in the line for 2 hours because you paid for these darn tickets and you want to ride this ride, and you'll stand in the line for 2 hours because that's all you know. But now that I'm a pass holder, I'm like, oh, I've seen the ride line at 5 minutes. Why am I going to stand in it when it's 120 minutes? Or like, we've learned like, okay, like, we don't have to watch the parade anymore, so we stand in line because everybody else is watching the parade. And so the line times are way shorter. So there's just certain ways that I operate now in Disneyland that are different because I know differently, and I can behave differently. Okay, so as opposed to before, when that's all that I knew, is like, you just walk in and, oh, there's the line, I'm just gonna stand in it, not knowing that I had other options, right? So just to recap, right, we can't be annoyed at God for like, and okay, I'm gonna get on my soapbox, but I just have to, if I'm gonna be of service, because I've read all the books. I've read parenting books, I read marriage books, I read all the books, right? And they give you all this great advice. They give you all this great advice. But then when you try to apply it, you're like, why does it not work? And this is, being in unforgiveness and bitterness is the main reason why all of these other things don't work. And then also, like, you got to tune into what God is saying to you. What do you need to do to rectify the situation, right? Like, going back to Ezekiel, God told him, prophesy to these bones. He did it, the bones obeyed, and it started growing muscles and tissue. But if God didn't give me, God didn't tell me to go and do it, it probably wouldn't have worked for me because it wasn't lined up for me. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, so back to the 3 steps, right? 1, forgive God, because although he doesn't need our forgiveness, it's our releasing him from judgment that's going to help. Like, right now we're being blocked because we're in bitterness and resentment towards him for the things that have happened. Number 2, we have to forgive the perpetrator, the person who hurt us, because the same thing, resentment and bitterness is what's blocking us from receiving the blessings that are entitled to us. And the last one is forgive yourself, right? It's the same thing. When you live in the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, you're living in resentment and unforgiveness towards yourself. right? You are, yeah, you're pretty much hating on yourself when you're living in shoulda, coulda, woulda. Like it's eating you up inside, and it's not the business. Just saying. Okay, well, that was our first Wisdom Wednesday here in the group. I hope you enjoyed it. It's very long. I don't know if all of them are going to be this long. I just felt like that's what I needed to say this morning. So, if you have any questions or need any clarification, go ahead and post your comments and questions below this video. If you're like, if something struck a chord with you and you're like, oh, I need more help, and it's only until supplies last, until my calendar gets full, that rapid relationship recovery offer is not going to be available. And so there's a link. Go back and read the group rules, which is an announcement. It should be pinned to the top. If not, if you want the link to book your call with me, it's a 20-minute call. Just get in, get out, rapid recovery, boom. We'll figure it out together if you're kind of stuck. So, just want to say good morning, happy you're here, and hope you get what you needed to get from this morning's video. Love you guys. Talk to you soon. Bye.